Hi, my name is Allie Capasso, and I am the Assistant Director of Admission here at MPA. And I would like to welcome you to our Freethinker Friday series. Today, we're going to be talking about STEAM the MPA way. And what I love about having STEAM as a core educational value here is that kids get to experience the design thinking process. And really, for me, that practice of empathizing, defining a problem, being able to prototype, and then coming to a solution gives kids a lot of experience with understanding the importance of that practice, right? Of the process, rather than necessarily the end solution, which I think is an amazing lesson for our students to learn. I am joined by some wonderful guests today. We're going to have incredible insight to what STEAM looks like at MPA. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Maybe I will start with Hannah. Go ahead, Hannah.
Absolutely. So I'm Hannah Sullivan. I'm an upper school science teacher here at MPA. I teach 9th grade physics, 11th grade chemistry, anatomy and physiology, and environmental science.
Okay, Keith.
Hi, my name is Keith Broflot. I am new to MPA. I am the Innovative Technology Integrationist, plus I'm the interim makerspace, the area I'm in, coordinator. And I work with lower school, I work with middle school, I work with upper school, and I teach an upper school class right now that's Introduction to Computer Science.
Awesome. And then we have two students joining us. Ansel, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hey, my name's Ansel Stryer. This is my first year at MPA, and I'm in 8th grade.
Awesome. And then Amy.
Hello, my name is Amy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior, and this is my 3rd year at MPA, and I'm also an international student.
Awesome. Before we jump into the questions, I wanted to just point out that we are live streaming, right? So if you are watching us at home, you can type any question or comment that you have into the chat, and we'll try to answer those throughout our talk today. So feel free to do that at any point. Keith, I'm going to start with you. We often hear lots of iterations of this term, right? STEAM, STEM. Can you maybe define STEAM for us and then tell us a little bit about what that looks like here at MPA?
Sure. I have kind of a long tail experience with what used to be called STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I worked at the Science Museum for a long time, and the Science Museum worked with federal agencies. And what was very interesting is they were trying to figure out a way to talk about those things and come up with a clever way for politicians who need to be able to speak very short sentences and very clearly to all of the folks that they support. And so STEM was this really great phrase that came in. But my background's in art, so I worked at a science museum for a long time, and I've always been interested in the sciences. But I have art muscles and art techniques and art thinking, and I realized that because if you do a little studying, they're so close, they're so intermeshed with each other, that creativity, it naturally evolved into making a much better acronym. STEAM sounds way better than STEM. And the arts integrated with the sciences makes the most sense because you are doing all of those sorts of things when you're coming up with an idea or being creative.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hannah, could you talk a little bit about STEAM curriculum right here at MPA has been really at the foundation of what we do since we were founded. And that was this week, 40 years ago, just a couple days ago. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it's become a buzzword in education, and that sometimes that can lead to really surface level curriculum that's not very well integrated into everything else that the school's doing. Can you talk about how that's different at MPA?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always been a really big part of what we do because we have this model of experiential learning where kids are learning by doing, and that aligns really nicely with STEAM. And we've also had a strong emphasis on art. So naturally, as a science teacher, kids coming in, they're extremely talented at art. Amy is a great example of this. So as I start to do science experiments, they're always integrating that in. So this idea of STEAM is really, it's just very natural and organic. And then in terms of actually having this, be related to the curriculum, well, it is really important to us that we cover the core information that we want to cover in a science class, and that kids leave here really well prepared for future schooling or careers. But it's really easy to do that in a way that's very focused on that experiential piece, doing things in a hands-on way, making. So being able to go to the makerspace with Mr. B and do an activity there that's directly related to my curriculum. So we don't have to create things that are created just for the purpose of having this design thinking or having this STEAM approach. It's really just part of the way that we do science every day here.
Great, thanks. Amy, you are part of the Upper School STEM Education Club. Could you talk about what that club is, what its mission is, and then maybe a project that you've done as part of that club that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. So as its name shows, I guess we focus to bring a STEM education to kids of all age levels. We've worked with preschoolers and up into our upper school. So one of the projects that we've done was that one time we went to a preschool in the area and a daycare in the area, and we worked with the preschoolers, and we made LED little cards with them. So it's also another perfect example of a STEAM project is that the kids were decorating the cards, so that's the art component of it, and then also integrating a electrical circuit into the card, and we were working with all the hands-on stuff and problem solving with the little kids. So yeah.
Do you enjoy working with the little kids?
Yeah, it's really fun seeing them trying to figure out how to connect all the circuits and stuff. Sometimes we don't even know exactly what things are went wrong with the circuit and why it's not lighting up, and we work together with the little kids to figure out.
Yeah, figure out where they went wrong so they have some ownership over that, right? But I think that the cool part about doing this work with little kids, right, is you get to see those first times where that connection and a light turns on, right? And that's kind of a magical thing, right, to be able to see. So I don't want to forget about the art component of this, right? We talk a lot about science and technology, but art is a really important part of our curriculum here at MPA. We don't consider it an elective. We really consider it to be a core educational value. So Keith, I'm curious if you could tell us about maybe a traditionally thought of art class that did some scientific work, and then vice versa, a more traditionally science class that did some artistic work.
Well, maybe I'll do an example. I'm not teaching art here, but I am teaching STEAM, and that means that I get to teach art and I get to teach science at the same time. I can describe something that I did with my my computer science students, which actually ended up being really interesting. We're learning coding. We're learning coding from people who have had experience doing computer coding, and some people who have never done it before. And one of the first things that we did was we used a very simple program called Turtle Art. And this is working with upper students. And the idea was that you would use code to be able to draw lines on a screen. And at first, it seems very simple. I make a square, I make a geometric pattern. But then we ask them to start to think about, and this I think surprised the students, I want you to be expressive. I want you to try to do something that generates some kind of emotion. And I have a couple examples of some of the things that were generated in the class. And I really think they're pretty stunning. And then here's one that was done. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a very, very fine pattern in this, and it's concentric circles, and that's all of the code that's showing as well. And then finally, I have one other one in here. And I think this idea, especially at MPA, this, if you just saw this as a pattern in clothing, you wouldn't say that was someone exploring computer science. You might say that was someone who was an artist who was being expressive, trying to make new kinds of fabric textile patterns, and they were exploring these ideas. So this notion that we need to separate those two things, science and art, I actually don't really believe in it. I think we come to the table with these strengths. Each person comes with these strengths, and they come with this curiosity. And being able to create with your hands first allows you to explore materials and ideas. And then the science kind of puts a structure behind it that allows you to do things with more kind of dexterity, more intuitiveness. So it gives you tools to advance those ideas. So I kind of think it really is an amalgam of them. And MPA, it's really interesting that they dedicate the way that they think here at the school, to be able to bring them together and see the strengths of both coming together.
That's awesome. I actually stopped in Keith's classroom the other day, just yesterday maybe, when his students were making some of this art, right, with these little robots that they had programmed, and it has a pen attachment. And the coolest part is that I've gone in there over time, right, Keith? There was a point where Keith was doing some 3D printing because they realized, oh, we can create our own sort of Legos that would work with this robot that would be better to hold our pen, right? So you can see some of that red piece right there.
This was all printed with our 3D printer, and we're doing kind of mechanical stuff. And at first they're doing these programs where they drive this thing around, very simple stuff. But suddenly then, well, how do you have this thing, this clump of plastic and motors and stuff, become expressive? And that, I think that's where the change is. And then we can use our tools in the space to be able to fabricate the things that we need if they don't exist, like this special part that holds paintbrushes or pens.
Yeah, I love that. Just that natural transition to like, oh, we can make this. What does that process look like, right? Coming out of a need from the project and being able to have the flexibility to do that. So that's really wonderful. All right. So one of our big interdisciplinary STEAM projects that happen at MPA is in our 8th grade, and it's called our Future Cities project. So Future Cities is actually a national program, and every year they ask students to create a city 100 years in the future. And then they give you a task every year or a problem that the kids have to solve. So last year it was to create a city that could be sustained on the moon. And this year it was a city that could be, people could live in with zero waste. So Ansel is one of our 8th graders. So Ansel, you just finished this project. Can you tell us a little bit about it and maybe how the class also spanned over some of your classes that weren't just science?
Yeah, so it's a really fun project, and it really incorporates a bunch of different pieces, and it's really, you can make the city your own, and you work in a team of 4 to design the city, and you can choose wherever you want it to be, whatever population you want it to be, and then there's a couple different things you have to make. You have to make a 3D model of your city, you have to write a 1,500-word essay, and you have to create a 7-minute video about your city. And so we really worked on those different things throughout the classes. Like in English class, we wrote our essay, and our English teacher helped us with those. And then in science, we worked on planning our city and the model. And then in seminar, in the makerspace, we built our model. And then in social studies, we created our presentations. And it's really just a really fun project. And then there's a school competition where I think there were 16 teams this year, and everybody goes head to head. And then there are 3 winners chosen that go on to state. And then there are 8 all-stars, which are different students that performed really well. And they also get to go on to state and make the state teams.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe Keith, you can fill in some gaps too for Ansel, is that one of the other parts that you did as part of this project was create those, the plants and the compost pillars. Can you talk a little bit about what you did there with learning about sort of the way compost works?
Yeah, so really big part of that was kind of opening our eyes to what zero waste is about. And we did the compost columns where we took compost and we put it into these columns, and it eventually degraded into kind of this like dirt kind of thing. And then we actually planted plants with those, and it's kind of showing how all this waste can be reused and recycled into something else.
And you forgot to talk about how stinky it was, how awful it was an experience, making compost in the room, and how many fruit flies we generated as well. But the big idea was kind of, MPA has this other program, Food to Hogs. All the food that isn't eaten is saved and brought to a place that feeds hogs with it. And we took out of that and we used that material to be able to compost. So it was this sort of beautiful cycle, and we tried to keep it all within the zero waste city idea. Like food degrades, turns into this nutrients that we can feed to the plants grow up. And so that was the big idea, is doing these different models that are all integrated.
So again, a lesson that then went towards their planning for future cities, right? Something that they could use in building their cities. Now, Ansel, your mom volunteered on campus. We also have parents come in and be mentors. What was it like having her on campus, and how did she help in that process?
It was really fun. So yeah, a bunch of different parents and relatives of everybody came in, and they're each from their like separate fields that they're really good at, and it was really helpful to get advice from all of them on their separate fields. Like my mom, for example, she works with natural resources, so she helped us think about the side of how does our city impact those natural resources, and how can we help think about them, because a lot of the teams were maybe not thinking about that as much, and they were thinking about like their electricity. But she came in and she was really helpful for us to think about that other stuff.
Great, thank you. Amy, can you talked about some projects that you've done as part of the club, but maybe you can talk about a STEAM project that you've done in your academic classes and what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think one of the most like prominent one is the bridge project that we do for the honors physics class, and I did that last year. So it's basically like in the force unit, like after we like learn the unit and like learn to analyze forces and everything, like students will like either pair up or like they can do it individually as well to design a bridge with like limited material, and then like it's a bridge made basically only out of basswood and glue, and like at the end we will have like a bridge testing going on like in the school. And last year like it was also like on Zoom, so like families could watch the bridge like testing process as well, so it was a lot of fun. And like we will literally just like hang a bucket onto the bridge and like keep adding sand and waves until the bridge breaks. It was pretty exciting. And the process like itself, like obviously you're like designing for the bridge, but then also like so there's the physics component of it, but then you also like want to like take into consideration of like the design, like the visual like effect of it, because we also like besides, so the grade was assessed both based on like how strong your bridge was, and also like people can vote for like the best design or like the best name and like things like that. So there's like also an art component of it, and that was like hands-on and like a really fun like opportunity for us.
Do you remember how much like the record was for how much weight one of them took? Do you remember?
I don't remember like the exact weight, but like I think there was a ratio that we calculated based on like the weight of the bridge itself, and I think one of the bridges had like over 2,000 times its weight or something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
That's really cool. That project is really fun and the kids get really into it. We have videos online of kids reacting to the bridges breaking because there's such anticipation that builds, right? As you add more and more weight. And then you all of a sudden have that, explosion of it falling apart. It's a really fun activity for our students. Thanks for sharing that with us, Amy. Hannah, as a science teacher, I'm curious about how this kind of work influences not only what you teach, but how you teach, sort of the mechanics of teaching.
Absolutely. I think for us, we really since the very beginning at MPA, we've really wanted kids to learn science by doing science and being scientists. So we try really hard to have them discover some things on their own. So it's really, I do remember in high school for myself where we would learn something in chemistry and then we would do a lab that sort of reinforced or proved what we just read in the book. And it would feel really pointless. And so one of the things we try to do is we try to do a lot of our labs as exploratory investigations where kids are given a set of materials and they're given some instructions about what to do with those materials. They're gathering information, collecting data, gathering evidence, and then they can join together and sort of discuss what they learned in that lab. What did they see? Do some argumentation from evidence, and we can figure out what principles we learned from there. And then only at that point do we turn and say like, okay, now we can read a little bit more about this, and we can look at some traditional resources, or we can solve problems that relate to what we learned in the lab. So we convey a lot of the material through this hands-on process of students actually, in a sense, discovering it for themselves, even though it's certainly been discovered before, but they're going through that process of discovering it for the first time on their own. So that's really important to us. And then on the other end, we're often taking things that they've learned over a large period of time and integrating them into some sort of making or construction project that lets them apply the principles that they've learned. So for example, in my 9th grade class, we cover mechanics and we cover forces and we cover simple machines and mechanical advantage and work and power and energy. And then at the very end of that semester long study, we're starting to look at, okay, what can you do with all this? And they make a mousetrap car. And so then they're creating this car that runs only with the power of the mousetrap, and they're using everything that they've learned about mechanical advantage to apply it to this car that they create. They work individually on this project, but they're also helping each other. So as they learn how to do something in the makerspace or here in my lab, then they can share with other people. Like, oh, if you're having trouble getting your car to go, maybe you could thicken the axle, and here's why, and here's the physics behind that. And really, without even realizing it, they're using an incredible amount of the physics that we've covered over the course of the quarter in this capstone project that for many of them, they really are thinking of it as a fun project. It's a building project. It's a contest to see how far they can get the car to go. But at the same time, they're very organically applying all these principles.
Yeah, Keith, and thank you so much, Hannah. I think that also speaks to Keith's point about these things being so intertwined, right? That it's not fair for us to sometimes separate those things out. And what my brain goes to is also we're giving students so many opportunities to show their strengths, right? So maybe, for whatever reason, physics is not an easy concept that comes to them, but they are a maker, or they do excel in teamwork, or they do excel in these different pieces. They have moments in their teams to excel, right? And that's what I really love about these kind of pieces is that, again, future cities, right? One kid might be a wonderful writer and really can help their team with that writing aspect. Another kid is a fantastic maker and can work on the actual 3D model. So it gives a lot of opportunities for kids to shine, which I really enjoy. Keith, we've talked a lot about kind of middle school and upper school pieces, but I know we have some lower school families joining us today. Can you talk about what this looks like for lower school children, maybe kind of how often they see you, and then how you start to talk about these concepts and some projects that you've done with them?
Sure. Being so new, this has been my year to kind of develop those sorts of relationships with the lower school teachers, and how it has evolved and how it's been working is that I'm seeing a first, second, third grade teachers maybe once or twice every couple of weeks. They're all overlapping. My schedule is open, and they figure out how to integrate their curriculum. It was third grade that was doing this great unit on fractured fairy tales. And what they wanted to do is have all of the students build a strong house. And the design cycle is built in. It's actually labeled on the wall in this space. But what they would do is they would go through the design cycle of imagine the folks who need the house. There's empathy. Start brainstorming ideas, make a plan, and then start to prototype and build. And basically their goal was to make a little house that would withstand the huff and the puff of a giant wind, which was actually a blow dryer that I put into a box. And so they built this, they worked on it, they came in, they had a very, very limited set of materials. And then they had these ideas of how they're going to construct a strong. What is strong? How do you withstand wind? Is it just in weight, or is it dynamics like a boat? Does a boat, cut through the water in the same way that the wind would go around a building? So we had all these really cool experiments. And then at the end, we tested it. And we had 15, 16, 17. I think we had just 2 that sort of completely blew away. And actually, it was great that they did, because everyone loved that just as much as succeeding when they just flew into pieces. But that idea of kind of like prototyping fast, coming up with an idea, building fast, prototyping, try your idea, test it, fix it, change it, all kind of embedded into this idea of working with the lower school and then working with a story and a narrative. Another activity we just tried for the first time is making faces. And that's one where we were going to have the first graders come in and sort of just explore building sets and like Lego and these connects. We have a whole bunch of different construction kits. But instead, I thought maybe we'd try this idea. I have friends at the Exploratorium in San Francisco, and they've been doing this activity where you look for faces in the world. And the idea was we have all these donated and collected materials. Use those materials and create a face try to discover that. And it does pattern recognition. You can talk about the development of a child and when they notice the facial structure. It's kind of art. It's kind of not art. It's exploration. It's learning about cooperation because they make a face and then they put the materials back and make another face. And we didn't have them make a finished thing. We would take pictures as they iterated. So here's one. And there's there's like 20 on the window of all these images that they would make. And so they would place these things down, yell for us to come over, take a picture. And what they were doing, I think, was aesthetics, but it was also sort of learning how to share the materials, be inspired by someone next to you, get an idea. Oh, that's what an eye looks like. Oh, how can you define the line of a mouth? So it was actually pretty amazing just how well it worked. And we didn't actually really consume any materials in the end. So it kind of fit in this paradigm of also, recycle, reuse, cycle through a process, collaborate, cooperate, all implicitly in this very, very simple activity. So we've done a couple things with lower schools. We're doing one right now, which is build a tree house. And each day they come in, they're thinking about the different structure and elements and walls and what's architecture and how to design a building that won't collapse, how to get into a building, and how to make a space personal for yourself. And those, like I said, come out of a collaboration. I talk to the teachers have an idea, and I make, I throw out suggestions that might make use of the materials we have or materials we need to get. So the space itself is it's kind of amazing. I wish every school had some dedicated space where they could do that. They could experiment in an environment and have the kids always have a place where they can do hands-on thinking with their hands and then conceptualizing ideas and making those ideas. And I do want to say one thing about Hannah's project. Hannah had a student who made their mousetrap using the laser. He actually trained me on the laser. So that implicit knowledge carries up as well as carries over, as well as carries down. And now I feel actually really confident with the laser now that I've seen what it can do and the way that we both work through figuring out how to make the instructions a lot more clear. So I have all sorts of appreciation of that project because it taught me a whole bunch of things that I'm now using for the rest of the school.
Awesome. Keith, the thing I love about the face one, right, is also we talk a lot about whole child education here at MPA, right? And with those younger students, so much of that social emotional piece is can be difficult to navigate, right? And now, especially we talk about with COVID in our world and how you read people's emotions and how do you know if people are sad or mad and how do you tell people that you're sad and mad? And so like looking at a face and then saying, how can I make this person's mad? And they change the eyebrows, right? All of a sudden you start to give these kids tools of interpreting the world, right? And also how they can kind of put their emotions out there as well. So I really love that.
Yeah, and I'll just add the feedback cycle of them saying, look at this, what do you think? Is it doing this? And then maybe I might make a cue or maybe, their teacher might make a suggestion, but it's mostly the people around them saying, oh, that looks like this. Mm-hmm. So the environment, the community is really kind of shaping the individuals here in this really, it's just great. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's the beautiful thing about being on a pre-K through 12th grade campus, right? We get to see that kind of evolution and growth of the curriculum over time. And the other cool thing is that we get to have those experiences like you just talked about, Keith, with Hannah, right? Where teachers get to kind of see that curriculum build and work with each other. So the wonderful thing is that if you have a child that's interested in STEAM or STEM, we have a culmination of that where they can earn a certificate of distinction in STEM. So Hannah, could you talk about what that means, what that project or what that program is, and then maybe an example of a STEM project in the past?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I've been thinking about listening to everyone here is this idea of community experts and how kids bring their own expertise into the classroom. They bring their life experiences and they bring the things that they're passionate about. And what we noticed in the upper school is at some point you start to get these students who are doing all this extra. They're already doing a lot. They're exploring something in great depth. And so we wanted a way to recognize that and nurture that a little bit more. So we started this certificate of distinction program, which can be something that's added to a student's diploma. And the idea is it recognizes the work that they're already doing in a particular field. So there's opportunities to do this in STEM, there's opportunities to do it in global studies, there's opportunities to do it in art. So the kids who are doing it in STEM, it's usually because they've already had a passion for something and they've been figuring out ways to explore it. We've seen some really cool projects from several different students. The one that really comes to mind for me, because I am so passionate about the environment and sustainability, and that's something that I really try to work with kids on and support, is we had a student who got really interested in that idea, and he was working on this idea of sustainable farming. And actually for several years, it wasn't really just part of his certificate of distinction, but from very early on in his upper school years, he was volunteering at this sustainable farm. He was learning about how they deal with energy on that farm. So they had solar panels and they had ways to be energy independent and carbon neutral. They had water recycling systems. So he was there learning all about that. And as he learned more and more, he was able to start to do some of his own independent experiments and projects on that site. So those are the sorts of opportunities that kids can find for themselves out in the world and then bring here to share with the rest of us. And the Graduate Certificate of Distinction just supports that sort of effort.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys, we are out of time. So I want to thank you all, our audience, for joining us. I want to thank my guests. If you want to see some of these classes in action, please contact the admissions office and we'd be happy to show you around. Thank you so much again for joining us today. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you'll join us for our next Freethinker Friday in February, where we're going to talk all about 40 years of MPA with our administrative leadership team. So we will see you then, and thank you so much.